Hello everyone and welcome to Music Theory with GUIM. In this exploration of Schubert's, we're going to continue our journey through the harmonic analysis of his early composition, Lament. In the excerpt, we'll begin with pickup notes from the final measure of the previous episode's excerpt, which contained the resolution of F7 over A to B flat major. So with that in mind, let's take a listen to this excerpt and continue our analysis. Alright, so in the previous episode, we mentioned the diatonic flat 7 6-5 chord being labeled as a 5-6-5 of flat 3, despite it being unnecessary. The reason why I mentioned it before is because we're pivoting over to B flat major, which means we're going to think of F major as the 5 and B flat major as a 1. So until noted otherwise, all of our Roman numerals will now be relative to B flat major as the tonic. With that said, let's jump on into this first measure, which consists of the 1 chord B flat major. We're then mostly hearing an F7 over A, the 5-6-5. The first beat of the measure, however, is an A diminished 7, the 7 diminished 7. The intriguing part about this is that by using the diminished 7 structure, we're hearing G flat, the flat 6th scale degree of B flat major, which hints a bit towards the B flat minor sound, which could be a chromatic mediant key relation to G minor. So even though we're not fully hearing that relationship, it's slightly, just ever so slightly, hinted at. Of course, whether or not Schubert had this relationship in mind at the time is unknown to me, but considering this is an early composition of his, and he demonstrates frequent use of distant modulations in many of his compositions, it's an interesting thought. Anyways, you can think of this measure as two distinct harmonies, those being A diminished 7 and F7 over A, or you can meld the two chords together and think of them as a single F7 flat 9 over A. Either way, make note that the A diminished 7 only appears on beats 1 and 4. Following F7 over A, we then resolve in the next measure as expected to B flat major, the 1 chord. This measure and the following one are repeating the information we just discussed verbatim, minus the 2/16 notes and the melody on beat 6 of the second measure. After this repeat, we then hear another B flat major. This time, however, it lasts only for the first half of the measure and is then followed by G minor, which will now be labeled as the 6th chord. We then proceed to E flat major, the 4 chord, followed by C minor over E flat. Before we hear C minor, however, we hear B flat ascend to B in the voicing on the and of beat 4, which produces what can be labeled as an E flat augmented triad. This is a passing chord, and the main point of this harmony is to create a leading tone resolution of B to C. And we could think of it as a flat 3 augmented of 4, but that's a little bit convoluted, and we're just going to label the C minor chord. And we can think of C minor over E flat as a 2/6 of B flat, but instead we're going to think of it as the 4/6 of G minor because we're now pivoting into the G minor tonality. And this is easily heard as we have G minor over D and D major, the cadential 6/4 and 5 of G minor in the following measure. But rather than actually hear a resolution to G minor, our expectations are absolutely crushed by B diminished 7 over F, which is the 7 diminished 4/3 of 4. We then hear a rapid succession of C minor over E flat, the 4/6, G major over D, a passing 5/6-4 of 4, and then C minor in root position. After this descending bass line, it then steps up from C to D, and we hear another cadential 6/4 and 5 chord. Unlike the previous attempt, we actually do hear the resolution to G minor in the following measure. But before we dig into this measure, I want to mention that in the recording linked in the video's description, the form differs from the score posted on IMSLP. In the recording, the next 4 measures we analyze are saved until the very end of the piece after the final set of text has been passed through. So bear this in mind should you decide to read the score while listening to the music. Anyways, in these last 4 measures, we have some interesting moments. Firstly, we hear the opening harmony of the piece again with the augmented 4th approaching the 5th or C sharp ascending to D, only this time we hear that it has been raised by an octave and occurs twice in the measure rather than only once. And rather than actually conclude with this resolution to G minor, the harmony proceeds to a development of the 4 chord. To keep labeling simple, we're going to think of these chords in relation to C minor, but we're really still in the key of G minor, and it's not as though we have modulated. And this means that the first chord we're hearing, G7 over C, is the 5-7. The highest voices then descend through a C minor chord and land on B and D to briefly form G major over D, a 5-6-4. G major then sounds again with the bass line rising to E flat or G major over E flat. This harmony can be relabeled as E flat major 7 sharp 5 since it fits the sonic structure of said chord, which is the flat 3/7 chord of C harmonic minor. The major 7 sharp 5 chord is one that we tend to think, wow, this is a really hip chord, but how do I use it? Well, here's an example of that harmony. And similar to the E flat augmented we saw earlier, this is also used as a way to get to C minor, which we'll label as the 4/6 in G minor. We can also choose to think of this in a more traditional format and look at E flat major 7 sharp 5 as using the suspension and retardation embellishments. D and B are both chord tones of G major and are being sounded again before resolving to a unison of C. D is suspended and resolves downward to C, whereas B resolves upward to C, which makes it a retardation. This is similar to the minor major 7th chord in that we can choose to think of it as a 7th chord, or we can choose to think of it as a triad with an embellishment. At the end of the day, we're basically arriving to the same destination simply by choosing different paths of thought. Anyways, moving forward from C minor over E flat, we then have yet another G minor over D, the cadential 6/4, followed by what is now the 5/7 chord, D7. And then finally, we land on G minor, the 1 chord. So overall, we're looking at more examples of strong harmony written in the minor tonality. For the most part, we're dealing with simple diatonic structures with a little bit of chromaticism thrown in. So with this basic harmonic analysis complete, let's listen to the excerpt again and then conclude this episode. Alright, so what I recommend is going back and forth between the two analyses that I presented and comparing harmonies in different measures. For instance, consider how the two different 7 diminished 4/3 chords might compare. Also consider how other progressions might compare, such as the ascending C minor to C minor over E flat in the earlier installment compared to the descending C minor over E flat to C minor in this installment. And there are plenty of other things to consider too, so dig into this harmony and see what you can pull from it. And should you happen to have any thoughts or questions regarding your comparisons, or any that are particularly relevant to this episode, feel free to leave a comment below. In the meantime, thank you for watching another episode of Music Theory with GUIM.